Sangye Chodan Zoge Chonam La Chanchu Pardu Dani Japsushi Dagi Chushu Gibe Sonam Ki Rula Benche Sangye Dupa Shu Sangye Chodan Zoge Chonam La Chanchu Pardu Dani Japsushi Dagi Chushu Gibe Sonam Ki Rula Benche Sangye Dupa Shu Sangye Chodan Zoge Chonam La Chanchu Pardu Dani Japsuchi Dagi Chushu Gibe Sonam Ki Rula Benche Sangye Dupa Shu Kanje Duje Nizone Ta Dumje Bangbeje Tabe Chuni Tenje Be Mudam De La Cha Cha No So, so we'll continue the the writing of Nagarjuna that he sent to one of his friends, the king, and we started last year and we haven't finished much. So we'll continue from the verses that we left last year. We finished up to 29 and we continue with verse number 30. And again, this is advice that Nagarjuna gave to the king, his friend king. Of course, in the long term, it was advice given him how to free himself from the samsara and achieve liberation nirvana, as well as he gives some advice also how to live his life, as well as how to run the country, how to treat his citizens. And so yeah. So this is the so if we start with the verse number 30, where he said, "You mustn't commit any negative acts, even for sake of Brahma, a monk, and God, or someone high." So the object for something which is holy and high, you shouldn't create any negative for them. Or a guest, or even someone who is dear and close in your life, such as your father, your mother, your children, your queens, which means your wife, your queen, or your retinue. They will not partake of even a share of their hellish rapine. So what he is saying that we should not, of course he is referring to the king, but he is advising that we should not create any harmful action, any negative karma or negative actions on behalf of anyone. If you engage into any harmful negative actions, then you will experience the result of that. You can't have an excuse that because I did for someone else, therefore I should not experience the result of that negative karma. Whether you did for yourself or whether you did for someone else, as long as it's negative karma, negative action, harmful actions, then the consequences, the result is going to be unpleasant, pain and sufferings. And that cannot be shared with anyone. If I create a negative karma for my friend, when the result of that negative karma arises, even he want to share, he cannot share it. You individual, the whoever created, he or she has to experience themselves. And so therefore he's saying, for no matter what, we should refrain from engaging any unhealthy, harmful, negative actions. And then, although any commitment of negative karmic act may not cut you immediately afterward like a sword, nevertheless, when the time of death comes, whatever karmic result, there will become manifest. So again, as we mentioned during the weekend, even though some of the result of our negative, harmful actions might not manifest immediately, and we might not notice and experience immediately, but that doesn't mean there is no consequences of that such harmful actions, negative actions. So of course something like sword, if someone cut with sword, you can experience the pain immediately. You can see it immediately. But sometimes the consequence of negative karma might not manifest immediately, and just because it didn't manifest immediately, we might think there is no consequences of that, and he is saying that would be wrong. And so, depending on what kind of negative karma, when we talk about karma, whether it's positive or negative karma, in terms of result, there are karma which is manifest in this life, karma which manifests in next life, the karma manifests in many, many other future life. So depending on which kind of karma, some of the karma, consequences of the results of my immediate actions, even though I might not experience now, probably I could experience that after 10 years of the action of my present harmful negative actions. Even though I might not experience that result immediately now, but I could experience it after 10 years. Or some of them I might not experience within the next 10 years, but that could experience at a much more later, maybe 20 years, 30 years, 40 years before the death comes in this very lifetime. Some of the karmic result of our action might not manifest in this life itself, but then it could manifest the very next lifetime. But same of karma might not manifest even in the very next life, not in this very next life, because certain cause and condition not come together, but you will definitely experience one of the many future one of those future life. So basically he is saying, just because you can't see the result immediately, don't think there is no result of that. Don't think there is no consequences of that. And so that is his advice, because sometimes we tend to see in a very narrow, limited way. And so if there is no consequences immediately, then we tend to see oh, there is no consequences of such actions. But if we see with a much more broader and long term, then he is saying there is always consequences. And so therefore, we have to be very careful of cautious, careful, mindful of not creating any harmful negative actions. And then 32, the sage, the Buddha has said that belief in fact, so that is like faith of belief in such as law of cause and effect, and such as faith and belief in the three jewels, that there is the exalted wisdom, Dharma, realizing the reality, and that there is a being, Arya being, who has actualized that Dharma within themselves, and that there is that Arya being having worked with their mind and overcome the obscurations, that there is then becoming fully enlightened beings. So there is, so having faith and belief in that the law of cause and effect, and law of cause and effect, and such as three jewels, ethical self-discipline, and such as the practice of ethical self-discipline, whatever precept, whatever vows, whether it's the Pratamosha vow, whether it's a lay vows, or whether it's ordination vows, whether it's bodhisattva vows, whether it's tantric vows, those different practice, or at minimum the ethical discipline practice of refraining from 10 non-virtuous actions and engaging in 10 virtuous actions. So such ethical self-discipline, generous of giving, the practice of generosity or giving, making offering to holy objects such as Buddha, Dhamma, Sanghas, giving and practicing generosity to those who are in needs, who are in most needs. So such practice of generosity, giving, listening or studying, learning about the Dharma. So the practice of listening, the practice of learning the Dharma, moral self-dignity. So due to our dignities, that if I create a negative karma, is not correct, is not right. For example, as a Buddhist practitioner, that I should not be killing is not correct, it's not right. With that, as a Buddhist practitioner, I should not be stealing, I should not be engaging in a sexual misconduct, and so on and so forth. That is not right, it's incorrect. That is breaking my precept, breaking my vows, and so on. So on the basis of that, then trying to keep the practice of moral self-dignity, care for how others' actions reflect on others, and then also I shouldn't be killing and stealing and engage sexual misconduct and so on. If I do that, it hurts others. Then people will criticize. Not only people will criticize me, people will criticize the Dharma, people will criticize. So the consequences of my actions, how it is going to affect so many different peoples. On the basis of that, then you train to not to engage in any of those non-virtuous actions. On the basis of that kind of understanding, that and discriminating awareness, or the wisdom. So the wisdom that realizes, understand conventional phenomena or reality, the wisdom that relies and understand ultimate reality. Um, and so those are the 7 stainless Arya gems, precious gems. And internal, those are the 7 practice of internal noble gems or jewel, precious jewel. Understand that others' ordinary gems have no meanings. And so here saying the external gems, whether it's a diamond or precious metals, gold, silvers, all those ordinary gems, when you compare this internal gem, those ordinary gems have no essence, no meaning, no comparisons. When we talk about precious jewel or precious gem, it is something that makes us happy. It is something that gives us happiness, satisfaction, joy. And the external gems, whether that can bring us more happiness, not so sure. Whether it will make our life more happy is not sure. Sometimes they might make it more complicating, can bring more sufferings. The more gem, the more wealth you have, your life might become even more unhappy than before. It is possible. As we find sometimes, maybe with our own experience to some extent, anyway, if we look people observe around ourselves, there are certain people who are much more happier before they had all this wealth. Once they started to accumulate so much wealth, they started to be more unhappy. They started to have more fear, more anxiety, more worry, more suspicious for others. All this making their life more complicating, more unhappy and more sufferings. On the other hand, when we have these 7 internal jewels that describe that, those practices, then that practices and those internal practices really bring you, they are the real source of your happiness, joy. When we talk about happiness and joy, true happiness, true joy, it has to come from within your mind. That comes through transformation of your mind. And such transformation of your mind comes through those practices that described here. And so therefore, this internal jewel and gem is no peerless and above the ordinary external gems. And so we have to, so he is saying to the king and the rest of us to have that understanding. And then again, his next 33, gambling with dice. Of course, it doesn't have to be dice. So he is saying you should not engage in any kind of gambling. Because it is a source of problems for the individual, for the societies. Gambling, especially, gambling has from the very beginning some sense of covetousness, wanting to win the others' money or others for yourself. In a way, there's almost like, and the person from which you win didn't really give you, it didn't dedicate you, so it is almost like there's sense of almost like indirectly stealing to somehow, even though we are not taking in power with the power, but indirectly is like taking someone's belonging. So there is that part as even you win, and of course if we lose, then of course you are going to be very unhappy. Looking for meaningless gatherings. And so we should refrain from gathering or where there is too much, where it can increase too much attachment and anger. And then again, it's to protect ourselves, it's to protect others. You shouldn't be going in where there is too much kind of anger, because if you go in that, then you might also start becoming anger. And then with that anger, then you can engage in a violence act. And I think that is very true, like you see, sometime even we saw like last year or even before that, when there was a presidential campaign where where people become kind of aggressive and violent, because sometimes they don't come with that intention to become a violent and aggressive, but then everyone's around you started to become, then you started to, not even without being aware, you become like that. I always share a story, my own experience. One time I was in Dharamsala. I went for His Holiness Dalai Lama's teachings. After the Losar, he used to give teachings after Tibetan New Year every year, and of course it happened during the March 10, and so uprising day. So I participated in that march, and we started. And at the very beginning, when we started, you just kind of participate. You don't have any bad feeling, any negative feeling, anything. It is just participating in that to remember the day and to make it more awareness for the local people, and that to kind of more to bring the awareness. But of course, when we were going, there was certain slogan, and then we were reciting the slogan, and without noticing, after some time, I noticed that my speech was coarse, what you call coarse, because so shouting so loudly. Not even being aware that, I noticed my speech was coarse because of shouting so loudly. So I can see my fist, because each time we were doing like that. So you are in that kind of, I can see the fist. So that is how something you have no intention and motivation to begin with. Then in that kind of environment, you become very kind of someone can become like that. And so that is, unless of course someone who is a very mindful of their mind and their action, probably they will be able to resist of that kind of things. But sometimes if you are not mindful, sometimes we wouldn't know. And so therefore that is why, whether it's anger, whether it's attachment, when there is a lot of those kind of gathering and environment, so your anger and your attachment can increase very greatly. So therefore, to refrain from such kind of environment, to protect yourself and your mind. So that is laziness. Yeah. So laziness, refrain from laziness. If we are laziness, then of course we cannot fulfill anything. We cannot fulfill our Dhamma practice. Neither we can fulfill even ordinary, we cannot accomplish even our ordinary goal. And so you have to overcome laziness, relying on misleading friends. So again, we should refrain from the misleading friend that can influence us to lose our track from our practice, from practicing the Dhamma, from becoming a better human beings, from becoming a more compassionate person. So from where your friend can mislead, oh, compassion is a weakness. Why you have to protect yourself? So you shouldn't be compassionate. if you be compassion, that is sign of a weakness, and some kind of those. Sometimes you can be kind of misled by your friends in that, and that you have to be selfish. Being less selfish and cherishing others is not good for you. It's not good for your families. You should be more selfish and like that. Giving that kind of advice. Those kind of like that leads us further from our goodness, after misleading friends, because we as a practitioner at the very beginning, when you don't have a strong practice, then you can be very much influenced by what kind of friend around you and environment. Once you are a strong practitioner, once you have strong, then of course that doesn't, even you are surrounded by in a not so much healthy environment and friends, they will not be able to influence you. You will be able to influence them. But when we are not strong with our practice, then they could influence you in a negative way. So therefore, again, I'm trying to refrain from physically being too close and friend. Intoxicants, of course, drinking and using, smoking and using drugs, abusing those things. And so it is, those are harmful for your health, all of them. Is a source of problem for the societies. A lot of crime comes because of too much drinking, because of too much abusing the drugs and like that. So and so therefore he's saying that you shouldn't be so at least we shouldn't be abusing and drinking and so on too much. And so that is what, and roaming around in the night. And so again, roaming around in the night late. And then again, I mean, you see a lot of time, a lot of trouble gets into those midnights. People going to bar and different places. And then that is where they get in argument, fight, and like that. So for that, and so therefore, roaming around night brings about the worst rebirth state. And so, of course, not only it brings immediate kind of different unpleasant result, but also in the futures. It leads to one of the lower rebirth, and even in this life your fame decline, and so of course in generally people who gamble a lot, people trust them less. People talk bad about them in generally, even in gambling, in that. And of course, someone who abuse intoxicants, also of course. So with all that, then it decline your fame, and people talk bad about you and that, and therefore abandon those six. So he says. And next one, 34. It has been excellently said by the teacher of gods and men. So referring to the Buddhas. Is referring to Buddha. The Buddha has said that among all wealth, contentment is the best. So be fully content. If you know contentment, then even you possess no wealth, you will be perfectly rich. And so here again he is saying practice the contentment. If you practice the contentment, and if you have contentment, then you will be satisfied and happy. If you don't have contentment, then no matter how much wealth you might have, you will never be satisfied and happy. And the reason why we want to accumulate wealth, why do we want to accumulate wealth, is to bring more happy. The reason why we want to accumulate is so we believe that that will bring us happiness, joy, satisfactions. And so here he's saying the joy, satisfaction, happiness does not come external wealth. It comes from internal wealth. The internal wealth is that contentment. And again, I think it's very, very, very clear that we will observe, you know. I have seen people who have so much in this part of the world and who are very miserable in their life. And some of them I have known personally, who have so much externally, you know, wealth, but so much unhappy, so miserable. On the other hand, I have seen also other part of the world where certain peoples have so little, but very happy in their life, very happy, very satisfied, very content. So what it shows is the happiness, sense of satisfactions, joy is not coming from the external wealth. It was coming from internal wealth. So here is saying, if you want to be happy, satisfied in your life, then the most important is to have that sense of contentment. If you don't have sense of contentment, even you own the whole world, still you will be unhappy. Even though you are the most richest person in this life, in this planet, this world, you will be still unhappy. But if you are content inside, you might be the most poorest in this world, you can be the most happy. If we think, I think, if we see some of the writings of Milarepa, his songs, you can see the joy and happiness that comes. And he has nothing. He has nothing. He has only one ball that he was carrying. That is the only thing he owned. Even the robe was very worn out. Even he didn't have proper robe. But he was so happy and joy. Why? Because there's contentment in his mind with whatever he had. And again, also we can see even in monasteries, same thing, you know. Even in monasteries, some monks, they have nothing, very little, and they are so happy. And then there are some other monks who have much more, but who are unhappy. So it's not about how much you have externally, it is about how much you have internally, how much content you have, sense of contentment. And so therefore here, and I think this advice is probably very good for the king. Of course for everyone, especially for the king. There is a story of, that was at the Buddha's time. There was one beggar or homeless beggar, and one day he found precious jewel, precious stone in one of those garbage, you know. So he proclaimed that he is going to give this to the most poor person in this country. And later he gave it to the king of that time, Geboselker. And then the king asked, that you proclaim that you are going to give to the most poor one, why do you give to me? And he said, you are the most poor in this country because you are never satisfied and content. And so, so that is, it's similar like that, you know. So here he is saying, if you don't have contentment, then you always want more and better all the time. Wanting and wishing better and more all the time, if you don't have contentment. That means you still have poor mentality. Poor mentality. So therefore you are poor internally. If you are content, then you are very happy, satisfied with whatever you have now. You don't wish more and better. You are quite satisfied, happy with whatever situation at the moment. And therefore, you have a mentality of rich. Therefore, internally, you are very rich. Externally, you might be poor, but internally, you are very rich. And so that is where he's referring to. And then 35. Good sir, referring to the king, just as those with many possessions have problem, that isn't the case with those who desire are few. As many heads as the foremost Nagas have, that many problems arise from the gems that they wear on them. So then is kind of continuity of that verse as well. So if you are content, if you have less desire, few desire and less, because of your contentment, so you have less desire or few desire, you have less problems. So here he's saying, the more you have, the more problem you experience. Again, I think if we see it's true. The more wealth you have, the more problem you have, more suffering you have. The more wealth you have, the more worry you have, the more fear you have. The fear and the worry of being able to accumulate. The fear and worry of to be able to maintain what you have already accumulated. The fear and worry of losing what you already have. So much worry, so much fear. Less you have, the less fear and worry of accumulating, the less fear and worry of maintaining that, the less fear and worry of losing that. If you have less, you can open your, we don't have to lock our door, isn't it? The more you have, the more you have fear of that. And just it is just like that in everything. The more you have, the more enemy there is. More people who are jealous of you. More people who track at you, the thief, robbers. And more competitors and so forth. The less you have, there's no one to be jealous of you. There's no one to trying to rob, thief. Less of that. Even though sometimes, of course, even you don't have, people might think you have and they might come. But they wouldn't be able to find anything That reminds me of the story of Milarepa in the cave. That he was meditating during the night, and then a thief came inside the cave and looking for the things there. And Milarepa noticed that, and he couldn't stop it. He just kept laughing. And he said, if I cannot find anything during the daytime, what can you find in the nighttime? And the thief got a little bit embarrassed and came and ran away. So even though Milarepa didn't have anything, of course, the thief thought maybe he might have something, so he came to that, but Milarepa didn't have any fear of that. So here is giving example of Nagas, the more kind of rich Nagas have more jewels on their head, and the more jewels you have, that means more heavier your head becomes. That means more pain, more problems. So it's giving example whether that is how it is or not, but it's just an example from legend and so forth, mythical legend, so forth about the Nagas. But basically, the reality is definitely, I think, and sometimes that is what I see even in many parts of the world. A lot of the people who live in a village who have very little, they seem to have less worry and fear because they have less. On the other hand, people who live in city who have much more, they have more worry and fear because they have more to lose. Those who have less, they have less to lose, so they have less fear. And so therefore, and so with that understanding, with that kind of understanding, then we try to practice to have less desire and few desire and practice contentment. So that is the thing. With that kind of understanding, that if you have more, that it could be more problem than yeah. And then here, verse number 36. So again, it is the Nagarjuna giving advice to the king to what kind of nature of wife he should get. But of course, if it is to a queen for the woman, then it will be the man who should look for not this kind of character or nature, okay? So again, with the context, you have to understand. Avoid taking these three types of wives for a man whose nature are to associate with your enemy, like assassin, and to be contemptuous of their husband, like a baroness. What is baronesses?
Like a princess.
A kind of royalty.
British royalty.
Mm-hmm. Or rob and steal, even the little things like thieves. So, same if it is a woman, then you should avoid taking those three type of husband. And so, again, who are associated with your enemies, that there can be danger to your life. So that means who doesn't trust you. So someone you take someone who can trust, and someone who try to put down others, and then trying to even take advantage of a wife or husband by stealing even the little things like that. And then 37. But one, so then he said you should take like those one. The one who is like a sister, who is compatible with you, who shares same kind of who has common values, yeah, common values, or like a female friend, goes straight to your heart, and so a friend who really go, who is not being a kind of pretentious, but who is really straight to your heart, and like a mother wishes for your welfare, and so like a mother for the child who only wishes welfare and goodness for the child. In the same way, husband or wife who only wishes good for his or her husband and wife, or like a maid who is obedience. If you find such a wife or husband, then honor her or him like a family daddy, or God, or yeah. And then 38. So then this is how to rely on in terms of, I guess when you talk in Lamrim, then they talk about what to practice during the meditation sessions and what to practice during the post-meditation session. And when they explain about what to do during the post-meditation session, then how to do during when you eat, how to eat it in correct way, and when you sleep, how to sleep correctly, what kind of intention, motivation. So it is referring that practice. And also this 38 is the verses that we often recite when we eat a food, and we use that to remind of our motivation for eating the food. Rely on food in proper measure. Like a medicine without greed or repulsions, not out of vanity or not because of showing off, or not because of obsession with the health, but merely for the sake of maintaining the body. So the advice is when we eat food, then we try to not to have the motivation of attachment and revulsion and so forth at the very beginning, but with the intention to eat it so that we can sustain our body, we can be healthy and sustain our body, and the purpose of sustaining and healthy our body so that we can practice the Dharma, so that we can be a benefit to other sentient beings, only for that reason, that like taking a medicine. The reason of taking medicine is so that we can survive, sustain, and be healthy. And the purpose of being healthy is not to harm others, but to help others. Not to engage in non-virtuous action, but to practice the Dharma in the virtuous actions. And so, so in terms of that, regarding that, the Buddha's advice to eat food with the modest, healthy, and with the modesty. In that, normally he advised, if possible, like, of course now maybe it's more difficult for people who walk, but normally the ideal is to have lunch, breakfast and lunch, not to have dinner. And if you do have dinner, have a very light. And that being the case, I mean, so it helps with your practice, because Um, it can keep your mind more alert and more clear. Whereas if you have too heavy food, then your body becomes heavy, and that makes your mind also not so clear and heavy. And also it helps to get up morning as well, early morning, and in that. And of course nowadays also say physically is more healthy. Even the doctors, especially the Tibetan doctors, will say that because in the night time we sleep, so it doesn't digest so well. It doesn't work. Digest system shut down during the night. So therefore, so that is also from medical point of view. Also, and then also another advice that Buddha gave is in regarding the food, to rely on vegetarian, and if possible not to eat meat. So that, of course, so that less animals being killed for that, for the meat, and also, of course, Buddha is telling, advice mainly from that perspective, but also nowadays, although for the health, it's better not to eat. And so, with that, so basically, I think as I mentioned in the weekend, is another, how can we make every moment of our day beneficial and cause of enlightenment, is by having the right intention, motivation. So even with eating, eating is normally ordinary activities. But if you eat with the right bodhisattva motivations, then eating become virtuous. And by eating, the act of eating become virtuous, cause of enlightenment, and dharma and spiritual. And so here, that is where the is saying, you try to have motivation, bodhisattva motivation, that I'm going to eat. The reason to eat is so, because of course with this kind of body we need to eat to sustain. So therefore I need to eat. I'm going to eat not because of attachments for my body, my looks, and so forth, not because of revulsions, anything, but because I need to be healthy, sustain this life, maintain this life, sustain. And the purpose of sustaining and keeping healthy is to practice the Dharma, so that we can be beneficial, helpful to others. So if you eat with that kind of motivation, then the act of eating becomes beneficial and virtuous. And then similarly, how to change our ordinary sleep also into virtues through the power of right bodhisattva motivations. And so here it says, "Oh Lord of the properties," so again referring to the king, "having passed the whole day and the night, day and the first and the last period of the night in constructive deeds, go to sleep with the mindfulness in between those two periods, without making your sleep time fruitless." So normally, if we don't go with that kind of right intention, motivation, then of course our sleep become ordinary, neutral state. So when we go to sleep, before we go to sleep, we try to be mindful, and then we try to have a strong intentions set up to get up early in the morning, because a lot of time, whether we are able to get up early or not, it also depends on our intention, how we set up intention at the very beginning before we go to bed. And earlier we are able to get it, the more we are able to practice the Dharma. A lot of time we feel that we become very busy and we find we don't have time to practice Dharma. But if we get a little bit earlier, then I think we will find the time to practice Dharma every day, no matter how busy you are. As His Holiness says, he get up around 3:30 every day, no matter how busy, wherever he is. And so every day he finds 4, 5, 6 hours for his practice every day, wherever he goes. So go to bed earlier and get up earlier. And I guess nowadays also health-wise they say that is better for the health as well. Because if we wait, later, if we don't get early, then later what happens is even though even when you have time, you think I will do practice, then the day started to become busy. You think of you need to go here, you need to call someone, you need to do something and that, and so then time pass without being able to find time to practice. Early morning, you can't call anyone. Even you want to call, everyone is asleep, so you don't want to call early morning. Even you try to go to any office or anything, nothing's open. And so you are not thinking of going out to do something. So then it is really good to practice because there's nothing else to do if you are able to get early. If you get late, then even you have time, you think, first let me do this and that, because so many things start happening, and also other people starting calling you or all these things, so then it's more harder to find time to practice the Dharma. And so therefore, disciplining and setting that kind of habit can be helpful. That is also all my teachers are also in Sherab there. Like every day they teach 6 class, some of them 6, 7 class a day, every day. And so during the daytime they wouldn't have much time to do their own practice. But all of them, they get around 4:30. And so when they get around 4:30, then they have time for their practice until 8, 9. And from 8, 9, then class starts when they teach. In that way, so then they are able to, no matter how busy during the daytime, they are able to find time for themselves to do their own practice. And so those can be a good example for us to manage our time. And so here he's saying that before you go to the bed, again same, you think, purpose of my life is to be beneficial to all sentient beings, to free all sentient beings suffering and cause of suffering, and to lead them to fully enlightenment. And in order to do that, I must achieve fully enlightened state. To achieve fully enlightened state, I need to practice. To practice, I need to be healthy. To be healthy, then I need to sleep. Or ordinary beings, sleep help us to be healthy and to have more energy. And for that purpose, so then with that kind of intention, motivations, if you go to sleep, then your sleep, whether you sleep 6, 7, 8 hours, all that become a virtuous practice, Dharma practice. And so that is again how we can transform our ordinary activities into Dharma activities, virtues, by having that kind of right intention, motivations. And so, and if we go to the bed with a virtuous mind, sometimes that can reflect even in your dream. You can also have a virtuous dream. And so then it helps during the daytime our practice help for the dream. Also that dream also encourage and help for our daytime practice, enhancing both day practice helping the dream helping our day practice, and so therefore that is the advice. And then here is always meditate properly on. So these are the four immeasurable practices. So always meditate properly on immeasurable love, which is the wish happiness and cause of happiness to immeasurable sentient beings, and immeasurable compassions, the wish to release the suffering and cause of suffering of immeasurable sentient beings, the joy, the wish to see the sentient beings not being separated from the happiness or the joy without sufferings, and then in equanimity, immeasurable equanimity, not being attached, not being discriminating by being attached to some and holding some very close, such as your friends, and then having a very distant mind and anger and hatred to your enemy, but having more equanimities. And so these are the four immeasurable practices. And so for immeasurable practices, it is called immeasurable in terms of one, because the object of those practice, sentient beings, it is directed to numberless or countless or immeasurable sentient beings. Also, the benefit or result of that practice is also immeasurable, countless. And so therefore those are immeasurable. And if you do not receive like that, the highest goal nirvana, so by practicing four immeasurable, then you will achieve nirvana, liberations, and fully enlightened state. So those become cause of nirvana and fully enlightened state. And even you do not achieve nirvana and fully enlightened immediately now, you will at least attain a Brahman, the God realm in the Brahman realm bliss. And so here is saying, while you are in samsara, you have a high rebirth with less suffering, and then in long term, eventually, then you will achieve nirvana and fully enlightened state. And so therefore, try to meditate that every day as much as possible. So again, when you do the practice in the morning, you can always start with four immeasurable as much as you can. And so by the means of four dhyana, state of mental stability. So here is talking about the four dhyana or four absorption or shamatha. First, second, third, fourth, which rid of the experience of desire realms, physical joy, mental bliss, and suffering. You achieve fortunate equal to the God of celestial realms of Brahma, brilliant light, full joy, and greatest joy fruit. So again, those practices of the three, the four dhyana or four shamatha or four observations, you try to, in that practice, you see the fault of lower, each of the lower realms, and you see the higher realms as something you inspire for, and through that, how that is. And so when you achieve the first, you see the the desire realms as fault, and form the first form realms as something you inspire for, and so therefore desire realm objects. So overcoming the desire realm objects, through that, then you achieve the first observation, and the second observations. In that, then you overcome the mental doctrine. It is not indirectly here, but you overcome the gross and subtle doctrine, is investigation mind, and then in the third, then you overcome even the physical joy, and then the fourth, then you overcome even the mental bliss and suffering, so it is more equanimity, the feeling of equanimity. Through that, then you achieve the fortune, and through those four different dhyana or shamatha or absorptions, you can achieve 4 different God realms. The first one Brahma, second one brilliant light, third one full virtues, and the fourth one greatest fruit. Those are the different God realms. And then 42, the mightiness of karmic action, whether constructive or destructive, derived from the 5 aspects, their frequency. So again, here is talking about the intensity or strongness of the karmic actions, depending on the 5 aspects, their frequency, the motivation. So it is say whether it's virtues or non-virtues, if you do frequently, again and again, then that becomes very strong. Okay. If you do it's virtues or either is non-virtues. If you do once a while, then it is not so strong. But something which if you do again and again frequency, then it becomes very strong from that aspect. Secondly, the motivation, adrenaline, how strong your motivation is, okay? Depending on your intensity and strongness of your motivations, then that karmic result, whether it's positive or negative karma, will be strong or less strong. Less strong motivation, then less strong result. The absence of opposing force. So, again, it is virtue, non-virtue. When you engage in it without opposing force, then again it becomes greater. But if it has opposing force, then through the power of that opposing force or the antidote, that virtues or non-virtues become less stronger. For example, maybe you might have an intention to do something non-virtuous, and you engage in non-virtuous, and then you try to apply antidote immediately. And so because of that, the force of that antidote, that negative action that you have created become less strong, intense, because by applying the antidotes. And so, but if you don't have that opposing force, then it becomes very strong. The benefit or harm created by the basis of whom you their aim. She, I think maybe it's the she. Yeah, she. Thought. And so that is on the basis of whom you are aim. For example, if we create either virtues or non-virtues to our parent, for example, is more stronger than aim at someone else because of our karmic connections, because of their kindness to us. So that's any action that is positive or negative directed to us, such as our parent, is much more stronger than none of our parents. Or any negative or positive action directed or aimed towards someone who is very in poverty and needy ones. Also, that is again because they are the most needy ones. So therefore, that action is much more stronger. If we kind of help someone who is more needy than someone who is not needy, that action is more stronger. Or if we harm someone who is powerless than someone who has power, then again that is more stronger negative karma, because of the basis is more in the needs of that. So that is another. And the major quality possessed by that basis, and then someone like such as the holy objects, harming to, let's say, ordinary beings and harming to a bodhisattvas is stronger if you harm bodhisattva. And harming to bodhisattva and trying to harm Buddha is more stronger because of their qualities. And same with when we try to practice virtues such as making offerings to ordinary beings, create merit, but not same as someone who has high realizations, compassions. And then someone who is the first bhumi, second bhumi, 10 bhumis, and then the Buddha, the higher their qualities, the stronger the result of our actions. So on the basis of therefore make effort in constructive behavior, having those 5. So therefore, when we try to engage in the virtuous actions, then we try to have all these combined together. And when we try to engage in the non-virtuous action, try to make sure that those are not there, so it becomes much more stronger. Less stronger. And so that is by knowing that, then we can apply to when we engage in the virtuous action. We try to have the strong motivations. We try to create frequently again and again, and we try to do something in relation to those with more higher qualities and those who are basis, and by without any opposing force of such as regret for the virtues and so forth. And then 43, just as a few grams of salt can transform the taste of small quantity of water, but not that of Ganges river. Realize that minor negative karmic actions are in fact like that with respect to the vast root of constructive force. So here again, he give an example. If you put a small salted water in a glass of water, it will change the glass of water, it becomes salted. But if you put that same amount of the salt in the river Ganges, it doesn't make any differences. It cannot make the water in the river Ganges salty, because it's too little to influence that, to change the whole. In the same way, so here is saying, in the same way, if we have a strong virtuous practice in our life, if we have very strong virtuous practice in our life, like a river of Ganges, so even sometimes when we create negative karma, it will not be able to influence that our virtues. On the other hand, if we don't have a strong virtuous practice in our everyday life, then even the small negative karma can influence and make it very strong. So then advice is, of course, we create negative karma due to time because of not being mindful, and sometimes maybe our delusion is too strong, and because our delusion imprint is so strong and so forth. So those can happen. But if we build up a strong virtuous practice on our daily life, and if we try to live a virtuous life in that way, then even time to time when all these negative thoughts come, negative speech and actions arise at time to time, it will not be able to destroy by that incredible vast amount of our practice. And so then that is why he's advising to do that. Flatness of the mind and the regret, ill will, foggy mindedness and sleepiness, desires, intent, and indecisive wavering. Realize those 5 obstacles are the tip that plunder the gems of constructive behavior. I think it is talking about the 3 here I think he's talking about the Tom Kunjonga the 3 obscurations to be overcome, the path of seeing, and so flightiness of the mind is like the distractions or excitements. So that is the distraction, and the excitement being wandering off from your object of meditations. And regret here referring to the regret to the virtues, okay? Not just a regret here, regret to the virtues. So that is another obstacle. Ill will, bad feelings, harmful feelings to others. Then foggy mindedness, so that is like the dullness or laxity, and that is where there is no clarity in your mind to the objects of the meditations. So where your mind is kind of like a foggy, no clarity in the objects. So that is another obstacles. And then sleepiness. So this, and then desire is intense. Desire or attachments to the desired object. So attachment to the desired objects, and indecisive wavering, and then doubt, not being very, having two-minded, not being, of course when we talk about doubt, there can be positive doubt and there will be negative doubt, and so here is referring to the negative doubt, that so all these realize those 5 obstacles to achieve single pointed concentrations and many higher realizations, and definitely the path of seeing. So therefore they are like the tips that plunders the gems of constructive behavior and realizations, and so therefore we have to overcome those obstacles. So to overcome those, then we need to develop mindfulness and introspection mind, strong mindfulness, introspection mind, and to overcome the ill will, then loving kindness, compassion, to overcome the attachment to the desired objects, then the wisdom realizing impermanent, wisdom realizing selflessness, and so forth. And then 45, belief in fact. So again, as we mentioned before, that is the faith or belief in law of cause and effect, the karma, and 3 jewels, joyful perseverance. So joyful effort or perseverance towards the dharma, so toward the virtues. So not a joyful perseverance towards negativities or non-virtues, but it's something joy, joyful perseverance effort towards the virtues, and towards the virtues, and mindfulness. So the mindfulness to be able to recollect the object. And to be able to keep the objects of your meditation and without losing the objects. Observe concentrations, to be able to place your mind or keep your mind or focus your mind or awareness to the objects as much as you want, with the stability, clarity, and intensity, and discriminating awareness, which is again the wisdom, realizing the conventional ultimate reality, are the five supreme dharma measures. Strive after them, and therefore try to cultivate all those, and they are known as the force and power, and also what brings you to the peak. So when we talk about path, we talk about the path of accumulation, path of preparation, path of seeing, meditation, and normal learning. And so in the path of the path of preparations, then there is, within that there is four: Tue, Tsemo, Soba, Tue, heat, Tue, Tsemo, peak, Soba, perseverance, and Chechok, the great supreme. So within that there is four levels of path. And in the first two levels of the path, then there is this called the five forces. And then there's two second level of the path, then they are known as five powers. So that in terms of the number is the same. The five forces are the believe in joy, believe in fact, joyful perseverance, mindfulness, observative concentration, discriminant awareness. In terms of power, they are also five same, but then the sharpness, the intensity grows from force to power. So in the first two levels of the path, then it is the force, and second two level of the path, then it becomes the power. So that how is in terms of that path. So that and so that brings you to the peak. For example, I have not gone beyond sickness, old age, or death, or being parted from what is blessing, or beyond what karma will do. To get away of its antidote, repeatedly thinking like that, you want to become smart. So again, when we become when we become overpowered by some kind of pride, then in order to kind of bring down our pride, then we have to reflect, contemplate. And so, of course, there are many different practices that were here. One of the practices saying that, how can I become so pride because I'm in the nature of suffering, I'm not free from the suffering. How can I become so pride when I'm not free from the suffering of sickness, when I'm not free from the suffering of old age, when I'm not free from the suffering of death, when I'm not free from the suffering of what being part of what you want, and when I'm not free from suffering of from not getting what you want, and all beyond what my karma will. So when you think in that, repeatedly contemplate, then you begin to see there's no reason to be so proud about it. you begin to see you are still in samsara, you are still bound by the karma, you are still bound by the delusions, you are still still bound by the nature of suffering, different level of suffering. So when you are in that, how can you become so proud? How can you kind of, with that kind of proud and arrogant, how can you treat someone with that kind of arrogant and bully others? How can you put them others? How can you mistreat others? So with that kind of meditation, then it helps us to be more humble, more grounded, and keep us on the ground. Mm. And then next one, if you desire higher rebirth status, such as three higher rebirth, or liberation or nirvana, make into habit of correct view. So try to have the correct view. And when we talk about correct view or unmistaken view, we can talk of maintain correct view, or maintain unmistaken view, and beyond maintain right view or correct view or unmistaken view. So when we talk about the correct view of maintain, then that is the view of law of cause and effect, the karma. And so you need to have that understanding. And then and when we talk about the correct view beyond the mountain, then that is the view of emptiness. So in order to achieve liberation, you need to have the correct view, understanding of emptiness. In order to have a higher rebirth, you need to have correct view of understanding law of cause and effect. Through the understanding law of cause and effect, then we refrain from harming others and engage in the virtuous actions. And through that, then we are able to create the practice, the pure morality. And through the practice of pure morality, then we can have a higher rebirth. And through the understanding of the right view of the emptiness, then we can overcome the root of all the delusion, the ignorance. And by overcoming the ignorance, we can overcome all the delusions which arises due to the ignorance. By overcoming that, all the delusion, then we overcome the karma, contaminated karma that is created due to the delusions. By overcoming that contaminated karma, then we overcome samsaric birth, which is the result of that. By overcoming samsaric rebirth, then we overcome all the suffering that comes due to the samsaric rebirth, and therefore we overcome the samsara and all the suffering, and then achieve liberations. For a person having a distorted view, wrong view, such as the wrong view of there is no law of cause and effect, or such as the wrong view of grasping inherently existing self and other phenomena, even the good deeds will all have unbearable rapid result, especially due to the distorted view of law of cause and effect, the karma. Even if we try to do something, then it can have an unbearable result. So maybe I better to stop here. Yeah. So here I think again the know that people in actuality have no happiness, no permanent, do not have self, and no clean. Those not have, thus not having those four close placement of mindfulness regard people in four reverse way and therefore is devastated. So basically, he's saying that due to the four mistaken mistaken conception, then we create negative karma and we get caught up in the samsara and experience suffering. Even though the body is impure, then we, due to mistaken, we regard it as pure, and therefore we again are mistaken. Even though our feeling is even though our feelings are the feeling of, even though it is a suffering, then again we mistakenly regard it as a happiness, and then again we are misguided. Even though the phenomena, even the consciousness is impermanent, then due to our mistaken mind, we grasp them as permanent. Again, due to that mistaken mind, we suffer. And even though the phenomena are selfless or non-inherent existence, we regard as inherent existence. Due to that mistaken mind, then we create some negative karma, and then we suffer and we get devastated. So, and to overcome that, then we have to practice the establishing for mindfulness by seeing the form as impure, the feelings as the contaminated feelings as a nature of sufferings, not as true happiness, but in the nature of suffering. The consciousness as an impermanent, and all other phenomena, the phenomena as selflessness or empty of inherent existence. And if we do that, then we can start to liberate from the samsara and the sufferings. And then next one is explaining about selflessness of the five, where the self is not oneness with the aggregate. The self is not separate, totally separate from the aggregate. Neither the self is possessed in the aggregate, neither the aggregate are possessed in the self. And like with that kind of five analysis, understanding, there is no inherently existing self and no inherently existing aggregate and phenomena. So explaining the emptiness through that kind of five analysis. And I think maybe we will have to stop here. Yeah. Otherwise, we will explode. Then I might get in trouble. So then we do the dedications. So we dedicate all the virtues for the Dharma to flourish in all 10 directions. And we also dedicate all the virtues for his own Dalai Lama, all the gurus, to have long, healthy life, all their wishes be fulfilled. We also dedicate all the virtues for healthy life, healthy and long life for all sentient beings, prosperity, successful life for all sentient beings, happy and meaningful life. And for each and every sentient beings to actualize the conventional bodhicitta and ultimate bodhicitta mind as quickly as possible. And those who have already actualized, not to diminish but increase more and more. and due to Thubten merit, which empty from his own side, may I, which empty from his own side, actualize fully enlightened state, which empty from his own side, for the benefit of all sentient beings, which empty from his own side. Yewadi nyoto ta lama sanke do ne do wa chi kya ma lu pa te yi sa la pwe ba sho chancho sencho rinpo che ma ke pa na ke kyu che ke wa nyam pa me pa yang kon le kon to pe wa sho kare ra we ko we shin gan de ten dan de wa ma le chung we ne che den sen wa ten jin ja so ye sha pe se te pa tu ten kyu che to zo chang shin chang kun jia we ten zin zhong pe we kun su to pa lu cho song ko we le mo tu chu pa da so du je kun du xiao pen shu. Thank you very much. Thank you.